Welcome back to 10 things we learned from this past game week. There's some huge things to go through today. I'm going to reel off some of the talking points. We're going to talk about Man United's direct style of football, Liverpool's substitution decision, Jean-Philippe Mateta maybe being the second or third best striker in the league right now, Arsenal and their set pieces. We've got Newcastle's midfield creativity issues, Erling Haaland needing some support, Tottenham's balance, it's all over the place, Ange being sacked, Sean Dyche being appointed, and Sunderland keep on rolling. Let's start with the big one then. It was Manchester United versus Liverpool on Sunday. You've probably seen all of the reaction by now. So we're going to have a look at how Man United won this game because it was a very different style of play to what a lot of teams in the Premier League are utilising. It was very direct, very little build-up. Saint-Lamans very much wanted to put the ball into the first phase immediately. There was no idea of building through the centre-backs, building through these midfielders. I didn't really see Bruno or Casemiro dropping deep to pick up the ball. They wanted to win second balls. And clearly this is a new strategy for Manchester United. Against Sunderland, it worked excellently. Lomans playing very direct, hoovering up second balls. And Cunha, Mountain and Burmo are really second ball winning specialists. Manchester United have played the 6th most direct passes of any team in the Premier League so far this season, and the majority of those have actually come in the last 2 games. And what that direct style of play does for United, it means they're not getting the ball pinched as much in their own third. And this is something Arne Slot spoke about in his post-match interview, not being able to counter-press United because the ball is never really in this third in United possession. It's very direct. Balls are being hoovered up, second balls by Cunha and Burmo. At times, Ahmad, who I thought had an excellent game. Bruno Fernandes is really good at it as well. And that's where United are launching attacks from the middle third. So this part of the pitch is really quite obsolete for United right now because no build-up is occurring. I think this is something that works, and this is something United should be persevering with. I don't have any issue at all with United being direct. I think some teams in this league would have real problems with this style of play, and I'm sure some Manchester United fans do have an issue with it. If you are one of those United fans, let me know why in the comments below. But for me, I would rather see effectiveness. The slow build-up through the lines is not effective for Manchester United at the moment. They don't have a midfielder who can get on the ball and progress it from that first phase, so cut it out. Go more direct. You've got plenty of players who are excellent at second ball wins. I thought Cunha yesterday, last 20 minutes in terms of winning second balls, was astonishing. Not just in the final third, but in his own third. When balls were being whipped into the box from wide areas by the likes of Kerkez or Cody Gakpo, United will win a first ball, and then Cunha's ability to read where that bounced, take his second ball under pressure, bring it out, draw a foul, was actually astonishing. The ball was sticking to him like glue. It was incredible. I also think this direct style of play is going to have big benefit for a player like Benjamin Sesko, who wins a lot of first balls aerially and then can progress quickly when United win the second ball. It can kind of be a couple of touches and then suddenly a counter-attack is launched. If you actually look at the second Manchester United goal, it comes from a couple of second balls being won. Harry Maguire wins a header, gets an ugly elbow, then United win a second ball through Sesko and break really quickly. This is an effective style of play that Ruben Amorim, I don't think has stumbled across, but has actually planned for. I think it's maybe not giving him enough credit to say that this isn't a strategy at this stage, because I think it is. Quick word about Harry Maguire as well. Winner of first balls, winner of direct balls. I mean, he has to be down now as cult hero status at Manchester United. He genuinely does. His goal output in big moments is ridiculous. Not only scoring a winner at Anfield, which kind of automatically qualifies you as cult hero status, but you look at his last few goals, the 91st minute equaliser against Porto, 93rd minute winner against Leicester, 47th minute match winner against Ipswich, 121st minute match winner against Lyon, 89th minute equaliser against Grimsby, 84th minute winner against Liverpool. The guy is insanely clutch at scoring last-minute goals. He's a constant threat in the box. United look much more dangerous playing direct and playing second balls. I think he should continue doing it this way. The next thing we learned is that Liverpool are struggling to find a balance with their substitutes. That's my opinion anyway. And I think the timing of the substitutions yesterday against Manchester United was too early. Or the volume of them at that game stage, in that game state, was too early. For me, it became really far too chaotic from a Liverpool perspective in the 62nd minute when all three of these guys, Ugo Ekitike, Florian Wirtz and Curtis Jones, came onto the pitch. They're all fabulous footballers, but the shape of the team suddenly got thrown totally out of kilter. When Dominic Szoboszlai went to right back, it was a 4-2-4. The midfield balance was sort of Wirtz in central midfield with four attackers. I thought that was the stage where it all went a bit funky for Liverpool. Yes, it resulted in them scoring a goal, but by throwing that many bodies onto the pitch that were attacking, I thought they lost a lot of sense of defensive stability. And even past that 62nd minute, even past the goal where, 78th minute, they get their equaliser, it still felt like Manchester United were extremely dangerous because there weren't enough defensively noused players on the pitch for Liverpool. Florian Wirtz, Ugo Ekitike, Chiesa, Frimpong, all on the pitch. It felt too early to do that. It felt like hitting the panic button, go and talk to attacking on FIFA. Like, it's only the 62nd minute, still a third of the game to go, and Liverpool were a very dominant team late in matches. The other substitutions that I thought were slightly questionable was Mo Salah staying on for as long as he did. He came off the 85th minute for Frimpong. I thought he could have come off easily in that first wave of changes. I understand that he is a club legend. Last season was absolutely freakish. His output, his return was off the scale. But this season, he struggled. He's struggled in pretty much every match we've seen him, from an output perspective, from a link perspective, from a support of his fullback perspective. But he's maintained his role until the 85th minute when, other players in this side who I thought were having an okay game, not an amazing game, were hooked. And I'm just not sure that was the right decision. I also thought the decision at the start of the game to bench Ugo Ekitike for Isak was a bit of a bizarre one. Ugo Ekitike has just been on the maddest tear so far this season. He looks like Liverpool's most informed forward alongside maybe Chiesa, I don't know. But is he allowed to impact the game enough in 28 minutes? For me, this would suggest no. He looked dangerous. He creates chances for himself with his dribbling, with his ability to find spaces in and around the edge of the box. But you're only giving him 28 minutes. I just can't get on board with it. I think Ekitike had to start this game. So when you put all that into context, with the substitutions, with the starting 11 being decided, I think this does probably have to sit a little bit at Arne Slot's door. And are we now at crisis mode for Liverpool? I think it's easy to say, 4 losses in a row, it's not great. I think that is a crisis for Liverpool. 4 losses in a row when you're chasing down a Premier League title with a team like Arsenal who look imperious at the back, don't look like they're going to concede a goal. We're going to touch upon Arsenal and their defensive ability later on in the show. But you can't afford to lose 4 games in a row. I think this is a crisis. I think there's an identity crisis happening in the midfield where Florian Wirtz plays. I think there's an identity crisis happening in the forward line because is it Isak? Is it Ekitike? Should Salah be starting? And I think there's an identity crisis happening in the fullback areas. Connor Bradley versus Frimpong. The lack of support from Salah to his right back is being exposed. No Trent. The ball progression doesn't seem to be there. Should Robertson be... I think there's so many questions being asked that 5 substitutions feels like panic and it still doesn't solve many of them. I think Liverpool are in a bit of a crisis right now. And I don't think we should be too scared to say that too early. Next up, I think we did learn that Jean-Philippe Mateta this season anyway, so far, is probably the second most effective striker in the Premier League. Antoine Semenyo, for me, has probably been the best all-round player. Erling Haaland is on a planet of his own. And again, we're going to talk about him and the lack of support he's getting later on in this video. But JP Mateta, right now, with the way Crystal Palace play, is absolute perfection in that number 9 role. You have Wilf Zaha criticising him midweek. Shut your mouth, zip it. Because Mateta, for the functionality of a 3-4-3 with 2 10s in behind him, could not be doing a better job. In this game, he took 11 shots. Let's just ponder that for a second, okay? 11 shots in 90 minutes. 9 of them in the box. Just, well, don't say anything. Just think about it. 11 shots in 90 minutes. That is an absolute joke. He could have had a first half hat-trick. He put up the highest volume of XG for a single game in Premier League history. 3.6 XG in 190 minutes. or at least since XG started being recorded, I think it was 10, 12 years ago. This is not normal. This is not normal numbers. And yes, he might not be the prettiest player. I certainly don't think he's the most technical striker in the league. Ekitike, for instance, is a much more technical player. Voltemada, a much more silky player. But Mateta is a bully of centre-backs, a player that picks up positions in 18-yard boxes that is constantly found. And that is a trait that flies under the radar for strikers. A lot of strikers find good areas in the box, but the ball never arrives at their feet. Mateta is always in the zone where a winger, an attacking midfielder, a wing-back, in the case of Crystal Palace, can find him quite comfortably. He should have had a fourth, maybe a fifth in this game. He should have scored at the end, the winner. And I know he's disappointed not to get the winner. But it's hard to deny that this output is anywhere other than world-class. Like, he's not necessarily a world-class player. I don't know what level I would put him at, but he's a world-class effector of games for Crystal Palace. And this is a Crystal Palace team that were unbeaten in 19 games. They're 8th in the Premier League. They're pushing for a Europa League spot. They should have been in the Europa League spot this year. I think they're going to have a really effective campaign in the Conference League. He scored midweek for France on his full international debut. I think there's a solid chance that he goes to the World Cup. We are talking about one of the most effective strikers in Europe. 13 touches in the opposition box. 9 of them were shots, guys. Just think about that. That is absolutely insane. Next up, let's talk about Arsenal. And I think yet more learnings about their set pieces being the key factor in them winning this league title. The way the Premier League is set up this season, open play goals are not going to be as big a factor as they have been in past campaigns. The open play goals per 90 number amongst every Premier League team is down by about 30 to 40% so far this season. Set piece goals are up by nearly 50% this season. It is going to be the factor that defines this Premier League campaign, be that corners, free kicks, or even long throw-ins, which we've also seen at the start of this season. And these lot are the masters of it. Since the 23-24 season, they've scored 16 more set pieces than any other Premier League side. In fact, 10 of their 15 Premier League goals this season, 10 have come from set pieces. That's, 58%, 59%? Absolute ridiculous numbers. Afterwards, I thought Saka was really interesting in his post-match press conference with Sky when he said, "My first 4 corners were shocking. I didn't even think they were that bad." And then you see the delivery for the goal. It is perfection. The standard of ball is as good as I've ever seen from a set-piece taking side. But Gabriel's dominance at corners must be studied. Are we talking about the best centre-back in Europe? I know Virgil van Dijk has traditionally been that. This season, though, and I'm just talking about this season across the first 8 games, I think Gabriel was the best centre-back in the Premier League, and I think might well be the best centre-back in Europe. Not just his defensive abilities, because, they've conceded 3 goals in the Premier League. 3 goals. They look basically impenetrable. I think his leadership and goal-scoring threat in the opposition box is one of the best I've ever seen from a centre-back at this stage. He gets on the end of every header. Every header is like, "Gabriel, watch out, here comes the steam train." And his performance of the weekend comes after flying 5,500 miles and 8 time zones to South Korea. He then played 90 minutes there. He flew another 750 miles to Japan for Brazil. Then he took the long-haul flight back to London. He probably arrived back Wednesday, really tired. Again, plays 90 minutes, massive contributions in both boxes. Yeah, I'm going to say it. I think Gabriel is the best centre-back in the league right now. I actually think he's having a better start to the season than Van Dijk, who, has been amazing and it's very, very close. But Arsenal's backline, it's just superior. Next learning, I think, is that Newcastle have creativity problems. And I think they have maybe a little bit of a midfield issue just starting to develop, because I'm not saying these 3 are a problem. Obviously, as a unit, they have been super effective. They have. But there is a slight issue developing with space in here behind them, because they can play quite flat at times. You look at the Danny Welbeck goal, I think this space does get exposed. just a little bit too often. But it's actually creatively is where I think that they are struggling the most. You know, the first shot on target for Newcastle in this game didn't come until the 74th minute. Now, I know they put up more XG than Brighton, but I still feel like they look like they're struggling to create chances for Voltemada. Not a huge amount of touches. In fact, the fewest touches of any player in the game. And I do think a large proportion of that is down to these three just play every game. Like, they must be tired. They have to be tired. Bruno G and Joe Linton, similar sort of travel to Gabriel from the Far East, playing, in Bruno's case, 86 minutes here. It's not easy. They don't rotate that midfield an awful lot under Eddie Howe. And I think you have to start looking at this away form. It really is not pretty viewing if you're a Newcastle fan winning away from home. They haven't won away from home in their last 7 games. I think it's a run that goes back to April. And yes, look, some of these games have been struggles. You know, Aston Villa, it's a tough place to go. Bournemouth, a really tough place to go. But equally, I look at the likes of the Leeds game in particular. This stands out in my mind, where they only managed 8 shots, didn't create a big chance, XG of 0.4, and I think to myself, they've got to be doing more, Newcastle, creatively to support Nick Voltemada. And I really mean that, because only 3 players for Newcastle have scored a goal this season. Voltemada's got 4, Bruno G's got 2, Asula's got 1. Nobody else has scored. You know, Gordon hasn't got a goal, Elanga hasn't got a goal, Tonali hasn't got a goal, Joe Linton hasn't contributed, none of the centre-backs have scored from a set-piece. I think this is a bit of an issue developing. The lack of creativity for Newcastle, particularly on the road, is starting to become a concern. Now, fortunately for them, I think that the defensive unit will bail them out in games. They've only conceded 7 goals so far this season. It's the joint second best defensive record in the league alongside Spurs. I think City have conceded 6, haven't they? Arsenal have conceded 3. Oh, Sunderland have only conceded 6 as well, by the way. So they're joint third best defensive record in the league. But they aren't scoring enough. 7 goals scored. You know, that is one of the lowest in the division. If they continue to do that, the pressure on the back line will be too great. It will be too great. Manchester United had it last campaign where they scored, a subpar amount of goals, and that meant that when they go 1-0 down, the pressure is so vast to bounce back quickly that it gets on top of teams. I think Newcastle need to figure out a plan B for scoring goals. The next thing we learned this weekend is I feel that City are Arsenal's closest title rival this campaign. I was shocked when I read that Manchester City have taken more points per game than any other Premier League side in 2025. More than Arsenal, more than Liverpool. And there is just certain little signs to the game that are really starting to impress me. Particularly Nico O'Reilly, who I think goes from strength to strength in the fullback area. He was given hell at times by one of the most exciting players in the league in Iliam Mjai, but still maintains his confidence on the ball, still inverts into midfield to support players like Nico Gonzalez, still wants to create chances and support Jeremy Doku. I think he is a very strong outside contender to go to England's World Cup squad. Where they are going to have to improve, though, if they want to challenge Arsenal, is goal contributions alongside Haaland. We can talk to a blue in the face about Haaland, and we will. 23 goals this season. He's already got 11 in the Premier League. It is absolutely ridiculous. But where they have issues is other goal scorers alongside him. Nobody else in the squad has scored more than 1 goal so far this season. We're 8 games in. And that is a problem. You look across the Premier League title winning sides, across history, the highest ever contributor of goals was Alan Shearer to Blackburn's Premier League title win. He contributed 42%. Thierry Henry in second place for Arsenal, 41% contributor. The average across the Premier League for the top scorers' goal contributions to a Premier League title winning campaign, 26%. At the moment, Erling Haaland is contributing 65% of his team's goals. It's unsustainable. Other players have to chip in. Now, I think Phil Foden definitely looks like he is coming back to his best. He looks really re-energized creatively. And I think at the weekend, again, proved that he can create chances from nothing. But he has to start scoring some goals, and he has to start scoring some goals at the rates we saw a couple of seasons ago when he won the PFA Player of the Year. Other players like Cherki coming back into this side, missed a big chance in this game. He has to hit the ground running. But Savinho and Doku, right? I love Savinho and I love Jeremy Doku. Jeremy Doku, I think, has improved his all-round effectiveness in the final third this season. He's a player that will bully teams and is just a demon in the dribble. But these numbers across his last 7 games, 8 games even, I think have to improve. Has to start contributing some goals. Haaland needs some help if Man City are actually going to win this league title. The thing we learned about Tottenham this weekend is that they still haven't got the midfield balance right. And it's something that Thomas Frank has to fix quite quickly, I believe. Because Xavi Simons is struggling out there in that 10 role. And I don't think it's just his fault. The goal contributions really haven't been there for him. Fine, he's a new player settling into a league, and we've made a lot about Florian Wirtz, haven't we? And people will be saying you should be making a lot about Xavi Simons, but he's a new player settling into a new league. I think it's the double pivot behind him that really needs a little bit more balance. Polina and Bentancur excellent at winning the ball back, and at times they're okay, particularly in Bentancur's case, at progressing it. But I still feel like without one of Bergvall or Papsar playing, they lack effectiveness getting the ball from point A to point B. Against Aston Villa, far too many times Polina and Bentancur won the ball in this area, but there was no progression centrally. And without Christian Romero, that was a huge injury. Without Christian Romero's ability to pass from deep, Spurs struggle to progress the ball to wide areas and centrally. Mateta is struggling physically, I think, in the Premier League and doesn't necessarily have the natural movement of a number 9. So I wasn't surprised to see him get hooked at 60 minutes. But what I was surprised about is that Spurs didn't capitalise on going 1-0 up more. It didn't feel like they ever had full control of the game. And I think that comes from this midfield balance. I think Bergvall has to start. He was so effective last season that it's odd he's not, in my opinion. And with that better balance in midfield, we'll see better output from the front three. There is clearly a lack of balance in the front three. And you can explain that to a large proportion away to the fact they haven't got Solanke, they haven't got Maddison, and they haven't got Kulusevski. Those 3 players add so much balance to the team. But Frank has to figure out a way of refining that balance without those players, because Maddison's out for the campaign, Solanke's very rarely fit, and Kulusevski's had injury problems consistently throughout his career. For me, Tottenham at the start of this season are a bit of summary of the Premier League as a whole. They look a little bit unbalanced. They look like they're lacking cohesion. They want to play for set pieces. They want to take the long throws. They want to take free kicks and corners very regularly. Tottenham's home record is now appalling. 3 wins in the last 18 Premier League games is flying under the radar. That is such a bad home record. To take 9 points from 18 games at home in the Premier League, that needs studying, man. That's like relegation form. The next 2 learnings that we'll do are a double hitter. First one, I was so wrong about Ange. I actually thought he'd do a decent job there at Nottingham Forest. I thought that his style of play, despite the fact it was vastly different to Nuno, would see an upswing because of the quality of players in the squad, and I was just totally wrong. It couldn't have gone more wrong. The sacking was brutal though, wasn't it? I mean, what was the point? I don't get it. Why not sack him pre-international break if you're then going to sack him 1 minute after a Chelsea result, which I think we all thought would go Chelsea's way? The majority of people thought Nottingham Forest would lose that game. So if you're relying on one match to save your coaching career at a club, you're already doomed. I just think that the decision should have been taken pre-international break, if at all. And that has seen now, by the time you watch this probably, Sean Dyche coming in as the new Nottingham Forest boss. The thinking for me is just all over the gaff here. You've got rid of Nuno because of a falling out with Edu behind the scenes. Not the right style of play. I think that's clearly the reason they wanted to progress the style of play with a manager like Ange and play a different style, a more attractive style. So Nuno to Ange, back to Dyche. Dyche feels more like a firefighting type manager, amazing Premier League pedigree, and I think he is a really good coach. But it feels more Nuno than Ange, right? Doesn't feel as progressive in terms of his footballing style. It almost feels like a decision that's being made to keep them in the league. You know, the majority of teams that change their manager 3 times in a season get relegated. Is that going to be the case with Forest? I don't think so, because I think Deitch is an excellent manager. He's going to keep them up, and the squad is still really good. But when you read the article in The Athletic about it, Forest also spoke to former Man City manager Roberto Mancini and considered an approach for Fulham's Marco Silva. Mancini's camp indicated that he was keen to take the job, but there were concerns over the length of the time the 60-year-old had been out of European club management. Global head of football Edu and global technical director George Sirianos led Forest's search to replace Postecoglou. I mean, Edu's clearly front and centre here, and he has to be in the spotlight. He has to be in the spotlight. At the weekend, Hutchinson and McAtee, Hutchinson the record signing for the club, McAtee, who was clearly gone there to play games after leaving City, weren't even in the squad. They weren't even in the squad. How is that possible, man? That is incredible. Then the decision to appoint Ange in the first place, incredible. And now, Edu and Sirianos are leading this replacement search. They've gone to Mancini, Marco Silva, and Deitch. 3 totally different styles of management, 3 totally different styles of playing, 3 totally different levels and calibre of manager. I just don't see the joined up thinking here. If you're a Nottingham Forest fan, please let me know your thoughts on the Deitch appointment. I think it's fine. I think he'll do a good job there. But what are your thoughts on Marinakis? What are your thoughts on Edu? It all seems so confusing in a season that should have been the best season in Forest's recent memory. You know, European football back, challenging last season for the majority of it for a Champions League spot. Now, firefighting to stay in the Premier League. Ugh. Final thing we learned then is that Sunderland are going to stay up. Yes, Doogie, Critchley, you did hear me right. Sunderland are going to stay up. You know, 14 points at this stage of the season. Absolutely remarkable. I'm aware they statistically, according to Opta, had the easiest start of a newly promoted team, I think maybe in Premier League history. Just based on the results calibre of last season's positional places. So it's been a very easy start on paper. However, you've still got to win your games. They've lost 1 of their last 5. These kind of results against teams like Wolves are massive. Wolves are now 12 points behind them. Already, we're 8 games in. They're 9 points clear of the relegation zone. And it's this backline I want to talk about. Nordi Mukiele, absolutely outstanding defensive contribution yet again. 3 tackles, 8 clearances, 6 of them were headers. Trey Hume, awesome. Underrated 23-year-old. You know, huge contributing factors. An XG of 0.24 in this game. Getting off 2 shots, 48 touches. He was constantly involved. I just love the way they're set up under Regis Lebris. I think they're doing such a good job. They are going to stay in the division. Even having players to come off the bench like Geertruida, like Mayenda, Dan Neil, it shows they've got depth. It shows they've got more depth than I've seen a newly promoted side have in a long, long time. And people are going to talk about players like Granit Xhaka, but maybe it's the players that are accompanying him, like Noah Siddiqui, who covers the ground that Xhaka can't because of his age so well, that should really be getting the headlines. Maybe it's players like Nordi Mukiele, who was kind of thrown out of the bathwater by PSG, has gone to Sunderland and is reinvigorating his career, that should be lauded. I think he is doing the most remarkable job so far this season, Regis Lebris. And yes, the fixtures in October and November, let's have a look at them, because I think they are absolutely harrowing. Everton, okay, Arsenal, this is the sort of run I'm talking about. Bournemouth, Liverpool, City, Newcastle, Brighton, Man City against Spurs. Like, it is a really, really tricky November, December. They play a lot of the best teams in the league. But because they've put themselves in such a good position right now, 7th in the league, 14 points, only conceded 6 goals, that even if they lose those games, if they pick up another 6 points, they're already on 20. You know, you look at the Premier League sides last season, scratching around to try and get to 10 points in mid-March. Regis Lebris, outstanding job so far. Okay, those were 10 things we learned from this past Premier League game week. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye.